Watching the playoffs from home always hits differently when you're the Philadelphia Eagles because every snap on TV feels like a reminder that if a few things had gone right, this team could have been there. Inside the building, it's described almost like torture. You see teams getting exposed, you see opportunities, and you think about how close you really were. The Seahawks destroying the 49ers was one of those moments. Seattle set the tone immediately with a 95-yard kickoff return by Rashid Shaheed on the very first play. And from there, the game never slowed down. When special teams flips a playoff game like that, it feels like house money for one side and a nightmare for the other. That's the type of moment the Eagles didn't get this year, and it's exactly why the organization is already deep into off-season mode instead of preparing for another weekend of football. The Eagles' off-season always starts fast. As soon as the season ends, the front office goes straight into futures contracts and roster maintenance. There's a limited window to re-sign players before they're free to go elsewhere, and the Eagles didn't waste time. Around a dozen players were brought back, and the names tell you a lot about how the team is thinking about depth, competition, and upside. One of the most interesting is Carson Steele. If you followed the NFL closely, you probably remember him from Kansas City as an undrafted free agent who unexpectedly made the roster and even started some games when Isaiah Pacheco got hurt. Steele played both fullback and running back for the Chiefs, and when the Eagles announced his signing, they listed him as a fullback. That alone is telling. In college at Ball State and UCLA, Steele carried the ball a ton, almost 650 career carries, and in 2022 he had over 1,500 rushing yards with more than 300 touches in a single season. He also caught the ball, with seasons close to 30 receptions. He wasn't really a college fullback, so the Eagles converting him at the NFL level raises questions about what the offense might look like depending on who becomes the next offensive coordinator. With Ben Van Sumer coming off another serious knee injury, the fullback spot suddenly becomes a real competition instead of a placeholder. Speed also continues to matter for this team. The Eagles brought back Danny Gray again, and they're still not walking away from Quez Watkins. Everyone knows the issues with hands and tracking the football, but the organization's philosophy is simple. You don't just discard speed. Watkins was a 6th-round pick. He can run, and that trait keeps him in the conversation every offseason. E.J. Jenkins is also back, a former college wide receiver that the staff hasn't given up on. Holland Pierce returns, Jake Major returns, and John Ojoku, who spent time with the Titans, adds length on the defensive side. Gabe Hall is another important one, because the Eagles liked what they saw from him during the offseason and want to see the development through instead of resetting again. Then there's the upside project that really stands out. Jose Ramirez. He was the MAC Defensive Player of the Year in 2022 at Eastern Michigan. He exploded with double-digit sacks, finishing with 12 sacks and 19.5 tackles for loss in his senior year. And that single season pushed him into the 6th round of the draft with Tampa Bay in 2023. He didn't stick long with the Buccaneers and spent last season in the CFL, but now the Eagles bring him in as an off-season project. This is the type of player Philadelphia has quietly done well with before. Small school edge rushers who show production can surprise people once they're developed properly. The coaching staff has already shown patience with players like Jalix Hunt, who also came from a small program and has been ahead of schedule since he got on the field. Ramirez isn't promised anything, but he's exactly the type of low-risk, high-ceiling bet the Eagles like making in January.
Linebacker Chance Campbell is back, someone who previously worked with Bobby King when King coached linebackers in Tennessee. Tarek Castro-Fields returns. Brandon Johnson is expected to be ready for the offseason program after an ankle injury. Andre Sam is back as well. These aren't flashy signings, but they fill out a 90-man roster that needs competition at every spot. Not everyone returned, though, and those absences are just as important. Kyle McCord hasn't been re-signed, and that's not a great sign, even if it doesn't close the door completely. Terrace Marshall hasn't been brought back. Taquan Graham, who dealt with injuries in Atlanta before landing on the Eagles' practice squad, hasn't been re-signed. Patrick Johnson also remains unsigned, though he could still return closer to training camp. The McCord situation is tied closely to what the Eagles plan to do in the quarterback room. Sam Howell has an expiring contract. Tanner McKee has trade speculation around him, and there's already been movement before, like when Dorian Thompson-Robinson arrived in the Kenny Pickett trade and was later cut. The message is clear. That room is going to look different, and the Eagles aren't rushing anything yet. The Carson Steele signing also points back to a bigger question about offensive identity. The Eagles have tried to work a fullback into the offense in recent seasons, and depending on the next offensive coordinator, coordinator, that role could grow. Steele brings real production history, pass-catching ability, and toughness. If Ben Van Sumer can get healthy after 2 major knee injuries, there could be an actual battle. Van Sumer is a strong athlete with good hands, but durability is now part of his story. Will Shipley adds explosiveness but still needs lower body strength to play through contact consistently. Tank Bigsby, who plays well off contact, gives the room a different flavor. Altogether, the Eagles are quietly building a running back and fullback group that's about competition, not comfort. Depth on the edge is another hidden theme. With Brandon Graham not signed yet, Jalen Phillips' contract situation uncertain, and Ozzie Ojulari dealing with injury issues, the Eagles know they need bodies and development up front. Ramirez fits into that picture as a long-term swing rather than a short-term fix. While the roster gets adjusted, the biggest storyline hanging over the building is the offensive coordinator search. Before the Eagles even finish evaluating the roster, they're already lining up interviews. One of the first names discussed is Zach Robinson. He comes from Atlanta but is really a product of Sean McVay's system after spending 5 seasons with the Rams. Robinson only called plays for 2 years, but his coaching rise has been fast. He started as an assistant quarterbacks coach, then assistant wide receivers coach, and quickly moved into higher responsibility roles. The appeal is obvious. McVay-style concepts mean more under-center looks, pre-snap motion, deception, and misdirection, things the Eagles simply haven't leaned into enough. When people inside football talk about Robinson, they talk about intelligence and structure, and about bringing things the Eagles' offense doesn't currently emphasize. Another major name is Brian Daboll. His fit gets people excited because of how he's worked with athletic quarterbacks and how he transformed Josh Allen, who entered the league as one of the most inaccurate college quarterbacks ever drafted high. Coaches around the league describe Daboll's work in Buffalo as elite teaching, pushing quarterbacks hard and building offenses around what they do well. The challenge is demand. Daboll isn't just on the Eagles' radar. Other teams want him too, and landing him wouldn't be easy. There's also personality to consider. Daboll and Nick Sirianni are both fiery, both alpha-type coaches, and that dynamic can either elevate a team or create friction. Mike Kafka is another name tied to the search. A former Eagles 4th-round pick in 2010, Kafka lost his job to Nick Foles as a rookie but later rebuilt his career as a coach. He's worked under Andy Reid principles but doesn't see offense exactly the same way as traditional West Coast coaches. People who've coached with him describe him as an outside-the-box thinker who likes trick plays and creativity. He's worked with quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, and others, and when he finally had consistent play-calling control, the Giants' offense looked different and more flexible. Then there's the internal connection with Jim Bob Cooter, someone close to Sirianni who understands Jalen Hurts and the structure of the current offense. Cooter has history calling plays, including with Detroit when Matthew Stafford was there, but hiring him would feel more like continuity than transformation. For fans, that matters. People want to believe Sirianni is truly handing over the keys, not just relabeling the same system with a new title. The Eagles are casting a wide net. Robinson and Daboll don't even belong in the same offensive family, and that tells you the front office hasn't locked itself into one philosophical answer yet. Hiring a coordinator usually takes 10 to 14 days, sometimes longer with second interviews and background work. What's happening right now is more about direction than final decisions. Everything ties together: future signings, fullback experiments, speed retention, edge projects, and coordinator interviews. The Eagles aren't tearing the roster apart, but they're clearly reshaping the edges and preparing for an offensive identity shift. This is the quiet part of the offseason where championships are influenced long before training camp ever opens. Now I want to hear from you. Looking at the players the Eagles brought back, the upside swing with Jose Ramirez, the Carson Steele fullback move, and the offensive coordinator names being discussed, what do you think matters most for fixing this team heading into next season? What really defines the next phase for the Eagles is how all of these smaller moves connect to the bigger picture. Futures contracts don't grab headlines, but they reveal priorities. The front office isn't just filling space, it's creating pressure. Every signing brings someone into the building who can take snaps away from a veteran if the veteran slips. That's how Philadelphia has always tried to stay ahead of the league, not by chasing comfort, but by forcing competition at the bottom and middle of the roster. Take the way they're handling offense already. Carson Steele being labeled as a fullback isn't random. It hints that the Eagles are at least open to changing the shape of the offense. Steele isn't just a blocker. In college, he carried massive workloads and caught the football. That means he's not limited to standing in front of the quarterback. He can be motioned, flexed, used in play-action concepts, and even involved in the screen game that this offense badly lacked. The conversation around the Eagles' offense lately hasn't been about talent. It's been about variety and answers. When defenses load the box or take away vertical shots, what's the counter? That's where players like Steele suddenly become interesting if the scheme actually uses them. Ben Van Sumer's health is a major unknown. 2 major knee injuries change careers. If he's back to full speed, he gives you athleticism and hands, but the Eagles can't assume that anymore. Will Shipley is explosive but still learning how to survive contact at the NFL level. His lower body strength hasn't caught up to his speed. Tank Bigsby brings power and balance, and Saquon Barkley, while not perfect with his hands, is elite at playing through traffic. When you zoom out, the Eagles aren't just building a running back room, they're building different types of backs for different answers. That only works if the coordinator actually uses those tools instead of repeating the same looks. That's why the offensive coordinator decision hangs over everything. If the Eagles hire someone like Zach Robinson, you're probably talking about more under-center snaps, more pre-snap motion, more misdirection, and more layered concepts. Robinson comes from a world where the offense manipulates defenders before the snap even happens. For a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, that can simplify reads and slow defenses down. It's not about turning the Eagles into the Rams. It's about borrowing ideas that make life easier on the quarterback and receivers. With Brian Daboll, the appeal is different. Daboll is about teaching, about molding quarterbacks, and about building answers week to week. His reputation comes from what he did with Josh Allen, taking raw ability and turning it into consistent production. The Eagles don't need to rebuild Hurts, but they do need to evolve him. The league adjusts fast. Defenses study tendencies, formations, and protections. Daboll's value is in not letting an offense sit still. The downside is availability. He's in demand, and when multiple teams want the same mind, you don't control the market anymore. Mike Kafka sits in between those worlds. He understands Andy Reid's structure but isn't locked into it. People who've worked with him say he's creative, willing to steal from different systems, and comfortable designing for the quarterback he has instead of forcing the quarterback into a rigid mold. That matters with Hurts, because Hurts isn't a statue, and he isn't a pure pocket passer either. He's at his best when the offense respects both his legs and his arm without turning everything into scrambled drills. Then there's Jim Bob Cooter, the familiar option. He knows the building. He knows Hurts. He knows Sirianni. The appeal is comfort and continuity. The risk is perception and reality blending together. Fans want to see a real shift, not just the same offense with a new voice. Inside the building, they care less about optics and more about results. But even internally, there's a question. Are you trying to evolve, or are you trying to stabilize? While offense gets most of the attention, defense is quietly being shaped too. The Eagles bringing back players like Gabe Hall and adding Jose Ramirez tells you they're still hunting for developmental pass rushers. Ramirez isn't coming in to start. He's coming in to compete, learn, and maybe flash. His production at Eastern Michigan shows he understands how to attack tackles and finish plays. 12 sacks and nearly 20 tackles for loss don't happen by accident. The CFL year doesn't erase that. It just means the Eagles want to see how that motor and technique translate back to NFL speed. Depth matters more than fans realize. Injuries happen. Contracts expire. Players age. Brandon Graham isn't signed right now. Jalen Phillips' situation is unresolved. Ozzie Ojulari has dealt with health issues. You can't wait until August to think about pass rush. The Eagles are already building layers in January, so they're not desperate in July. The same logic applies in the secondary and linebacker room. Chance Campbell brings familiarity with Bobby King. Tarek Castro-Fields brings special teams and corner depth. Brandon Johnson being healthy again gives another receiver option for camp. Andre Sam gives safety depth. These aren't splash moves, but they shape how aggressive the Eagles can be later. If your bottom half of the roster is thin, you have to protect it. If it's competitive, you can be bold. The quarterback room is another storyline hiding in plain sight. Kyle McCord not being re-signed immediately signals patience and uncertainty. Sam Howell's contract is expiring. Tanner McKee has trade chatter around him. The Eagles already showed last year they're willing to move quickly, like when Dorian Thompson-Robinson arrived via trade and didn't last long. That room is fluid. It's not locked. The Eagles are keeping flexibility instead of committing early, and that usually means they're exploring options quietly. All of this reflects how the Eagles operate. They don't rebuild in one move. They stack small decisions until the direction becomes obvious. Future signings, positional experiments, coordinator interviews, and depth projects all point toward one thing: adaptability. The NFL punishes teams that stay predictable. The Eagles saw what happens when an offense becomes easy to defend and when answers run out late in the season. The playoff games they're watching now are reminders. One special teams play can flip everything. One offensive adjustment can unlock a drive. One coordinator decision can change the personality of the entire team. Philadelphia isn't chasing stars right now. They're chasing structure, competition, and solutions. As the process continues, more names will come, more